Okay.
There we go.
There we go. Okay. So these associations are embodied in the aims, the communication, the values, the culture, and the stakeholders and their behavior of and in this place and the place design. So everything about a place communicates something, and this creates perceptions or associations in consumers' minds. So if you look at place branding and your experience, I'm sure that you have seen place branding in lots of ways, shapes, and forms. For example, on a country level, you will see Sweden or Finland probably having Visit Finland, Visit Sweden, where they communicate about the brand, what they have to offer. So in this case, I've incorporated some images from what Visit Sweden is communicating on their website, what they want consumers to associate with Sweden, with the brand of Sweden. And this is not only done on a national level, but it's also done on a regional level. Like here, you can see the example of Swedish Lapland, which also tie into several of the same things when it relates to nature and so on as the country brand does. So you will see that there is also a natural connection between the different levels, that they permeate and influence each other. And this also needs to resonate to create an authentic communication and brand. So here you can see they're talking about room to breathe, the Arctic lifestyle, the Arctic nature, and what we can see and do in the places. So hotels to visit, restaurants, and so on. Continue on further, you can go to the city brand level where you see Welcome to Luleå, the Luleå way, the communications from the Luleå side. And you can take this into any granularity. So these are different levels of communication, but you can take it down to a micro level where you talk about, for example, a mine or a microbrewery or something like that. So place branding actually relates to many different levels, and it's just a question of how you apply it. And as I said, it's the embodiment of information about the place. So how we communicate that and which parts of these aspects of a place do we want the consumer to understand and associate with our place brand? It can be related to many different things, as I will come back to. But what we want to do is we want to create a positive association in the consumer's minds. We want them to see this place as attractive, either to move to visit, or to speak about. So build a positive reputation. And this process is interactive, it's ongoing, and it's a multi-log between many different stakeholders. Because basically, everyone who is associated to a place or use a place are participants in this process of creating the place, co-creating it, and communicating about it. So while it is a public policy, place branding is something that is usually undertaken by governments or local governments, destination management organizations. It is something that influences and impacts others. So for example, external stakeholders, residents, companies that work in that place, and so on. So it is a multi-log which incorporates many different stakeholders, which is why this is such a complex process to undertake and to manage, because a place is complex and all these different actors involved are also complex and often have very contradictory needs or aspirations for a place. For example, the community might think, or the municipality might think, that tourism is great. It's great for the employment. It's great for our income, revenue. But the people living at the place might think that we have too much tourism, it's being overexploited, it's being too commercialized. So we often have competing interests here. But when we talk about these stakeholders, they can come from a difference of a range of places. So we have both visitors who come to visit us, tourists, but then we also have the residents to take into consideration, which are the actual people living there who we want to attract, but who we also want to make happy living there, the quality of life. So we have those two individual stakeholders, but then we also have public and private sectors, such as municipalities and companies working in the place, in the location. And finally, media. So there's lots of different actors to take into consideration. Let me see where I'm at. Okay, when we talk about the process of place branding, we come back to what you just brought up, which is the identity. The identity is at the base of the place branding process. In this aspect, we talk about brand identity, so the place brand identity. And if I ask you, what do you think is the difference between a place identity and the place brand identity? The difference between this is the place identity is the identity associated with the place, what the place means to itself, i.e. to the users of that place. The place brand identity is what we want to communicate, the image we desire people to have of our place. So that's what we try to communicate. While the place brand image is what people perceive when we communicate. Because as I'm trying to visualize with the image there, you can see that what is in the sender's mind might not necessarily be what is in the receiver's mind. And that depends on the fact that they receive information from many different sources other than what we try to communicate with them. So this is always, there is a dichotomy here, and it's difficult to achieve. But we need to be very aware about what we want consumers to understand about our place, what we want them to associate with our place. So that is the first step, understanding that. And then knowing that this is not a one-way communication process. This is a circular process where we try to communicate and influence the brand image, but the people living the place, the people in the place, the people visiting the place, they also contribute to forming this image, and they also contribute to feeding back to the identity, to creating this identity and influencing what that place identity should be. And both these aspects influence consumer behavior, if they perceive this as a place that is attractive to visit and live in or not. So this is the key components of this process. Any thoughts or questions? Am I speaking too quickly? Okay, good. Otherwise, just stop me. So now we know what the key components are. Then we come to the next step, which is communication. How do we get across to people? How do we make them see what we want them to see about a place? And here is 3 different components, or 3 key ways. That is primary communication, which is basically the place itself, the place physics, the landscape, the structure, the behavior of the people there, the behavior of the government there. All these things form the primary experience and communication of a place. Then we have the secondary communication, which is the formal communication. And that may come from municipalities, destination management organizations, or it could come from a museum at that location. All of these are formal communications. However, that type of communication tends to not be perceived by consumers as trustworthy as the third way of communication, which is the communication between people. So word of mouth, electronic word of mouth. This is the most influential way of communication. And this is why it's so important to get the stakeholders, the residents, the tourists on board, because we want them to agree with what we're saying, and we want them to spread it, because that's how we achieve the maximum impact of what we communicate. And all of these stakeholders that I just brought up, they have a role to play in each of these 3 types of communication, both in forming the place, being, acting, living the place as participants of that place, as communicators of that place, if they're working with that, and also as people communicating between each other. So these are 3 core aspects when we talk about place brand communication. And there are lots of people who actually, on their own volition, consumers, tourists, who create their own channels and communicate about a place. Here you have an example of the World Heritage Journey, which is basically a couple traveling the world, visiting different World Heritage sites and communicating about that. They make videos and they communicate with people. And they have quite a large following. So it's important to try to involve and incorporate the stakeholders, residents, tourists, as much as possible in this process. Okay, and we come back to place culture. This visual is supposed to show you the interplay between place culture, which is the way of life as experienced by people at the place and people who visit that place, and place identity, so what the place means, the meaning of the place to itself and to its visitors, and place image, so the perceptions of that place. And these three influence each other. It's a constant multi-log, as I said previously. And what we need to consider and take into consideration when we formulate a place brand identity is this: the place culture, the place identity, and how people perceive us, in order for it to be authentic, so it resonates with what people think about the place. And if it's not, we need to consider what to change. Is it something we need to develop? Are people not happy? Do they not see us as attractive? Why? How can we change that? What can we do to make them perceive it that way? Has it to do with communication? Are we not communicating well enough what we represent, what we have to offer? Or do we actually not have what they ask for? Do we need to develop new products, new experiences, new facilities, new services to make people happy? So, culture and co-creation is key to this process for it to be successful. And here we come to the cultural heritage industry, and I'm going to try to incorporate as much as I can, or exemplify how this has been done in different ways across different industries and different levels. So if you look at this process, you have conservation agencies. This is a theoretical, this is from a research paper. So they have been looking at conservation agencies and how they influence resources. So buildings, artifacts, and so on. And these are the components, the resources that we can use when we try to develop a package or an offering to propose to consumers. Then we look at the packaging, the interpretation of what is it that we want people to be able to do, visit, experience here. And we select, we try to package this in a neat way. And that can be done in many different ways. If you look at, for example, I'm going to show you some examples later, but look at, for example, a mine. You have some mines turning into museums. You have some mines turning into experiences. Going ziplining through a mine, it's activity-based, it's an experience, it's adventure. So the question is, how do we package this? Should it be something neat? Should it be an experience where you just visit and you learn and you take in, or should it be something that you act out and you engage with and live in, a lived-in experience? And how do we communicate it? How do we convey this to consumers? Do we make a leaflet? Do we make a website? Do we use social ads? How do we communicate it so that the audience understands and sees that we have this to offer? And finally, we target them with these products that we have designed. So the inputs are the primary resources that we have, and it can deal with land, labor, water, building materials, capital. And then you have intermediate inputs, which are parks, resorts, museums, as we've just been talking about, and so on. So these are the facilities available at that location. And then as intermediate output, you have services. So these are, for example, guide services. It could be souvenirs that we sell. It could be accommodations, meals, restaurants, and so on, or festivals and activities. So these are, you could say, added services on top of the facilities and the resources that we have at the core. And finally, the final output is the experience, when people come there to experience that place and what we have to offer. It could be for recreational purposes, it could be for education, it could be for business, and so on. So this is, you could say, the process of how we create these products. And I'm not sure that this is large enough to see, but I'm going to read what is in that red box there. This is a visual of all the products you can see related to a place. in order to give you an idea of what a place product is. So these could be related to pleasure, such as food and drinks. It could be related to events. It could be related to festivals and so on, amusement. It could be personal quest. It could be religious reasons. It can be to learn something, to develop yourself. It can also be related to what is called here human endeavor. And this is where culture comes in. So if you look at it, you have both industrial type products. So for example, science parks, you have historic or transportation or industry attractions. I heard that those of you who are here today, you're going to visit the airline, do you call it the airline museum? Flygmuseet?
Air Force.
Later today.
Force.
Yeah, that would be one example of a type of product under that category. Then you have built heritage, for example, military or architectural or historic sites. This could be, for example, if you've been around Luleå, you will know there's Hängnan, which is buildings from older times where you can see how people lived and so on and what they did. Then you have people and intangible heritage. So experiencing cultural differences, for example. So relating to, if you look at examples that we have from here, you have people going dog sledding, living in the Sami kota, and so on. So experiencing, living the culture of that place. So for example, Sami cultural, going to experience that. And then you have creative, which is performance, arts, festival events, and creative places. So this could be related to arts, for example, an art museum, something related to that place. And I think these are the key types of products that relate to cultural heritage. I'm sure that you can come up with many others, but this is what theory will tell you. So if we look at how this has been applied and what is happening, I've tried to incorporate examples both from Sweden and from Finland so that everyone can have some recollection. If you look at, for example, old towns, that is one way of communicating or keeping, safeguarding cultural heritage values and trying to use those in order to attract visitors, so for tourism. Here are some examples. We have the old town of, please help me pronounce this.
Rahe.
Yeah, Rahe. And then there's Ivanna. Ivanna.
Just E.
Okay, the old town of E. So Old Rauma. And these are some examples of where you have cultural heritage of how people have lived, what they have done. It could also be related to business, so shops, stores, what type of industries were there. So this is one way of packaging it. It's not much to package because these have been kept and they are there. But in other places, they create an event or a product from an old type of business heritage, such as, for example, here you have Långban mining, where they have created a cultural heritage museum in an abandoned mine, where you combine the place branding, trying to create place products with existing cultural or business heritage. So that's one. And also the example that they have here is they have not only created a kulturby, like a cultural village where you can visit, but they also create events there, like they have music festivals and so on. So they try to combine this and make it living by having events. Another is Fiskars Museum. It's an ironworks history museum in Finland, where they have also created a museum, and I think it was also quite interactive. I'll come back to that later. But where you can go and visit and learn more about the industry that was taking place there, the metal industry, and see the place and experience what was done during that era, so to speak. Then we have another example, which is On another, you could say, type or level, it's related more to services. If you look at mining, it's related to the industry of the production industry, while here you have a service industry museum, which relates to the hotel and restaurants sector. And this is from Helsinki, and they have also tried to create exhibitions and to make this a living experience where you can both go and learn about what the industry had to offer and what it was like, but also you can experience it in a way. And this is quite common, that we try to not only safeguard and exhibit something to show that this is something that used to exist, this is something to know about or to learn about, but also to experience it, to immerse yourself in it, to do something there. And that tends to gather much more interest among people when you can actually interact and do something at that place. So it's important not only to think about the facility and the information, but also create a service and experience around the place. Another example here is Näs Castle School of Crafts, which is a handicraft and local crafts museum, where they look at what people used to do when it comes to handicraft, and they have created a school where they teach people, but also have a kind of museum in that castle. So they're trying to preserve the cultural activity and to teach people about it. So you see there's different approaches as to how we apply this. Here is a you could say micro destination, Kovik's Fishing Museum. This is basically a set of fishing huts, you could say, on Gotland, which they have created into its own destination, its own product. And this is actually run by a local history society. So there are ample opportunities to see synergy effects between cultural heritage sites and traditions and the local history societies. Not everything must be run by local governments. There are also a lot of things and a lot of activities that can be done by local history societies. So just to show you that these need not be massive in scale to attract people, to make that place more attractive, but it can be quite small scale. And then when we talk about place branding, we see there are quite a lot of trends ongoing, and one being sustainability. Not surprisingly, I guess, considering what's happening in the world around us. And the idea when it comes to cultural heritage sites is that they can contribute a lot when it comes to the sustainability of place. Because social sustainability, a part of that is to safeguard the cultural history and values of people. So sustainability, not by building on cultural heritage sites, not only can you increase the social sustainability, but also the economic sustainability and the viability of cities and places by creating interest for people to visit there, gathering tourism revenue and so on. So sustainability is a key aspect. And then you have activities and adventures, as I was just saying. We see a lot more happening in people trying to turn historical sites into an experience, an adventure of some kind. Then we also see storytelling and gamification. And what we mean by storytelling is basically not just show people the place or the history, but to make them understand and feel it by following someone, for example, making it personal, talking about who the founders were and making people connect with their story, their life story, or their life work. So storytelling by making it more interpersonal in a way. And then you have gamification. In some cases, they will make you chase something. Imagine, for example, Pokemon Go, if you remember that, where people were running around with their phones and snapping things and trying to catch things. That's a type of gamification, which we also see a lot of actors incorporate into this experience. And it's actually a very good way if you want to make something family friendly, if you want to have the kids involved, add some gamification for the kids to make that more attractive for the whole range of visitors. So this is also a trend we see. And finally, digitalization, all kinds of digital or internet application that we can add. Augmented reality, virtual reality. So augmented reality being that such as in Pokemon Go, where you can add layers to something virtually, or virtual reality. You can see something in, for example, you put these glasses on and you can experience, and you can look out and turn around in the room. We also see that being much, much more incorporated, making things more attractive for visitors to come and experience. And also AI enhanced. For example, we see both universities or research, and we see municipalities trying to analyze data on visitor behavior and so on by AI in order to try to advance and augment their experience and their offering. Some examples we can see of how people or how municipalities or organizations have adapted this is by adding biking, hiking, activities, movements, sports into their offerings. More wilderness, more physical and virtual guides or digital guides, food tourism, move, eat, so that you have activities and you eat, so you experience the local culture. So these are some of the trends that we see happening. And examples available today are, for example, from mining, log driving, rafting. Here you can see some examples of how they, in Longban, they have brainstormed that they can have a game that allows you to become a miner for a day and to experience that in the daily life, the working or the daily life of a miner. Or holograms to show you the history of the rafting, river rafting, or the mine, log driving down river. Or adventure mine, where they go zip lining down into a mine. That's also an example of how this has been applied or enacted. And again, another example from Falu Copper Mine, where they also try to give you this experience, not only the learning opportunity, but feeling and living that experience. So we see this much, much more happening today. When it comes to Fiskars Museum, they have the digital museum. So you don't only want people to come there to experience it, but you also want to give people who can't come there the opportunity to experience and learn from this. And it also enhances or augments the experience of visiting when you have an audio guide to listen to when you walk around, for example. So, and when it comes to sustainability, basically sustainability tells us that we need to consider the three pillars of social sustainability, environmental sustainability, and economic sustainability when developing this. It's easy to say, it's harder to do, but we see more and more how different destinations try to apply this, such as here, where Visit Rauma in their website try to teach or enlighten their visitors how they can be responsible when visiting or when traveling to that place. So we can add different layers, both to the product that we offer, but also in enlightening our consumers and try to help or guide them to behave sustainably. And for those of you who want to get in and work with this practically, I've tried to incorporate two different guides. One is in English from UNESCO. It's their World Heritage Sustainable Tourism Toolkit, which gives you a step-by-step application process, how you can do this. And Handbok för hållbar turismutveckling i världsarv och kulturmiljö by Tillväxtverket, which basically also breaks this down into how to do steps. And what they say is, before starting the process, it's important to keep these things in mind and to think about or decide together with the involved parties who should lead the work, what do we want it to result in, and then how do we start up and how do we make sure we follow these guides or these steps so we don't miss any opportunities. And then finally, how do we involve different stakeholders in the work and how we do ensure that it's sustainable. And finally, how to establish open and effective collaboration so that it is fruitful, so that we succeed in this. And there are also some professional services or assistance. I mean, you might not need it. You're already in a great network where you have a lot of resources and a lot of, I'm assuming, tools and knowledge at your disposal. But there are also, both in Finland and in Sweden, actually entities that have the objective or the aim to help develop these things. So if you run across someone who actually wants to turn this into a thriving business idea, there are, beyond what I'm sure is the results of this network or this project, there are also organizations to help. And finally, we got, as I said, some questions before this meeting. I think they came up during one of your fika meetings. And there were lots of questions. I'm very happy to see, I'm happy to hear that there was a lot of engagement with this. One was, who has the right to conduct Placebranding? And as I just told you, basically all stakeholders who are involved in a place do create the place brand. But when knowingly or unknowingly, but if we talk about who has the right to use a label or a logo or a name such as Visit Sweden and so on, that belongs to the owner of that place brand. So anyone has the right to do it, but be aware of how you do it, so to speak. And then how should you relate to destination management organizations? And my suggestion would be communicate and coordinate. See it as a parent brand that will inevitably influence you in your endeavor, and that you inevitably will influence in turn if you start something. And finally here, is it good to create a place brand or conduct place branding for an area within a city that the destination organization has not paid attention to before? And the answer to that would be yes, it would likely be good. And neighborhoods are a level of destination or place branding, so definitely possible to do. And I would say that it would ideally be beneficial both to the residents of the neighborhood and to the place itself, making both more attractive if you do it in a good way. The question is, what are the values there and how can you transform it into a product, into an offering? I added this in case someone is interested in the responsibilities. I'm not going to go through it, but there are different levels that are responsible for different types of developments and communications. So briefly, you have municipalities, you have regions, and you have länsstyrelser, so the county administrative boards that have different responsibilities. But you can read about that later if you want. And when we talk about neighborhoods, there are lots of different ways to apply this to neighborhoods. If you want some examples, you have examples of urban design, such as the High Line in New York, Stockholm, Wood City, I think it's called, where they're building an entire area of that city in wood. So it's based on that urban design core value, so to speak. Then you have ethnic quarters or ethnic offerings, such as Jokkmokksmarknad, Chinatowns in different bigger cities. And then you have what is maybe most interesting to this network, which is heritage and cultural quarters, where you could, for example, look at the painters' quarters in Montmartre. You could look at Gammelstad Churchtown, the UNESCO heritage, Fiskars in Finland. These are types of heritage and cultural quarters, you could say. And finally, creative industry quarters. And these are the types of industry parks, such as Luleå Science Park, Piteå Science Park. I found one in Finland called Logoma. So there are many different ways to apply this on a neighborhood level, so to speak. And the final question is, when is the right time to start marketing a place that also requires, let's see, some work in the area? Should you do it gradually or run 100% when you're done? And the best approach is to do it gradually. and to start getting people engaged, because you want as many stakeholders, relevant stakeholders as possible involved. You want them engaged because they will help you formulate this. They will help you live the brand, be the brand, and communicate the brand to other people. So ideally, involve people early, communicate improvements to keep people engaged, to keep them active, to keep them motivated. And then and also organize events so that people are aware that this is happening. And finally, when you're done, do a full launch with a major campaign if you can, if you have the funds, so to speak. So I hope that answered the questions. You can see this is something I'm very interested in, so there's a bit, maybe too much of information. But any thoughts?
No, it's wonderful. I can thank you.
Very
You
good
did a great
summary.
job. Inspired. It's about how to. It looks so easy when you see someone having done it already. You're like, of course, those are the pictures you should use, and that's the slogan, and that's. But of course, there's so much work behind it, and so many stakeholders who need to.
Well, that's it for me. From the lecture part, then the idea is now to take a 10-minute break, stretch your legs, get maybe some fika or something, a cup of coffee, and then we have a workshop.